Hello, I'm back doing Walk the Web, coding the 3D internet, and today I'm working on cleaning up some of the startup files so that when you call up one of the web pages, the index page to browse 3D internet, or if on a Walk the Web server, or if you bring up the admin page, then I'm trying to limit down the number of functions that it runs. As I was coding it, I was throwing things in and out of there, and now I'm just trying to streamline it so that it works really fast. This is part of cleaning up and also creating an install process so that we can set up on a new server with the open source version of this code. So continuing on to that, I'm in this check load URL page, which I'm completely getting rid of, working my way through it. And we have the different sessions. Okay, so starting at the beginning, what I've actually done here, I've got the init session, and then I have the class WTW that actually starts in the session but continues to load in that section. And then following that, they subload a couple other things while they're in there. So we have things like the WalkTheWeb database class that already gets loaded, and that should be a little bit of where I'm at on that stuff. So I'm working in the init section, moving things to there where I should. I'm also working in this WTW section. I've already created a couple of functions in here for checking the database and creating one if you don't have it set up. It also helps configure your thing and as part of the startup process, especially if you're doing a new install. So the next part here now is the check host I did. And what this does, this function, when you come in here, I'm allowing different paths of your URL to be direct access to certain parts, certain communities. So for example, if I go to your domain name, 3d.walktheweb.com/http3d, I would look for the publish name. That's what I call them. Publish names is the part of the path of the URL. http3d publish name as a community. The first section's community, second section's building, and the last section's thing. So I broke it all down, tried to read through here. I broke down the path and I split it into the various parts based on what came in through the URL. And then I set those off as their different publish names. And if there's nothing, if you have no URL, I read in some default values that you're allowed to write to the sample config file, or to the config file. In my sample, you'll see some things. This explains this area more, where you can have a community and it's this path. You can have a building and they can come up as /buildings instead of a community. The keyword buildings works. And you can bring up just the building without the community. Same thing works for things. So you can set a default thing or even use this path to say things and then whatever publish name you use for the thing. And then there's a way of combining them. So if I said I want to go to my community and my building, first of all, when I go to my community, basically I'm going to use the starting point that I set when I'm editing that community. So I can walk to wherever I want it to be. Then there's a place in the admin menu where you can say set starting point. If I go to the community by itself, like this top line, then basically it uses that startup point. If I go to my community, pick a community / and then a particular building, it will use that building starting point in relation to the building within the community. So if I'm editing the building and I set a startup point right outside my front doors, that's where, and you place this building into a community, then basically anybody who goes to this URL will start at that starting point right outside the building in that particular community. So it's kind of dynamic that way. Also, you can do, you can set a thing. So let's say you have something you really want them to see. You can set a position around a thing. Then you can basically have that inside of a building or inside of a community. Things are a little bit more versatile that way. And you'll get that set position outside that thing within whatever community or building that it's in. You can also browse the things directly, as I stated. Okay, so these are just default ones. So if I came to the URL 3d.walktheweb.com, it would look here to see which community it should load by default. It doesn't append it to the actual URL. It just knows if it comes in blank, use this default community, and you just have to set it here. So if I came in here, made that HTTP 3D, it would look for where my community right here is HTTP 3D. Okay, now I'm not going to save the changes to that file. Okay, that's just my sample file anyway. So coming back over to here, what I'm doing, let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so the next thing is, when I wrote this up before, I had the access to each community being set, and you can actually make it where certain people can only browse it, certain people can administer it, and different things with the settings. In this case, one of what I'm doing is I'm actually reversing the logic on that. So I'm bringing up the community if you have access to it, but I'm just checking if you have access directly. Instead of bringing up, what I was doing before is I was actually bringing up an access list. So it would say everybody that had access, and then I would compare it against it. Well, now I'm just passing in what you're trying to access to, and I pass your session variable of your user ID, and then I just bring it back if you have access, or if you don't, then it'll know that by default. So reversing some logic there. Now get domain info. This is where I'm starting to build the initial information that it needs to create the community in the scene. So let's go through some of this stuff. First thing, let me get rid of some variables here. I have this community access. I'm doing a search across all the pages in the site. And what I have is a number of pages. Okay, check load URL. We have it in 2 places. I'm not going to worry about that one per se. Let's get rid of that. And the next one is there. Let's see. Here we have it in line 4. Okay, this is another setting that, let's see, check load permissions. I'm going to block it at the beginning. What I was doing before is I checked to see if you had access. If you didn't, then I would overwrite the variables. But of course, as we all know, that means it already wrote them to the page, and now it's writing another thing to the page that basically empties the variables. And if you view source, you would see those original variables. Let's just say that was a safety net shortcut that I did when I created the code, but it was never intended to be longevity of using the code. And one reason why I'm getting rid of it now. So getting rid of community access. The next one's building access. Okay, and this one, very similar. Basically, remove the building access there. You know, I'll get rid of thing access right while I'm at it here, since I know browsing security, user access, invitation code. Don't need any of those. Okay, let's go past any of those. We have it here. Let's get rid of that one. And in this file, I'm going to do the same thing. Down to invitation code. That may save us a couple seconds in repeatability, since I found the 2 places that it's hiding those things. Next one, thing access. And just to review, if you're just joining us, the way I designed it is for 3 different levels of access of items that we create when we're building websites. To create a 3D website, first of all, we have communities, which are basically joining up scenes. It's the 3D scene. And so uploads array, I gotta find out why that's even there, but okay, I'm not gonna worry about that just yet. And the next, so then the other part is we have buildings, which are 3D areas, or they're basically segments within the land, within the scene that you want to load up separately. So it can be a physical building, and as you walk on up on it, it loads up, and as you walk away from it, it unloads. And then there's things which are like your tables, chairs, could be avatars, could be vehicles, and those things can be placed in directly into a 3D scene community or a 3D building. So we have 3 levels of things that we build and place in different into different scenes. Okay, so 3D browser, we don't have that anymore. Like I said, I had a feeling that it was only going to be in these 3 places. So now we have user access. And user access, I expected it to be in a couple more places because that should... You know what? Let's keep user access. The reason is because it's actually going to be telling us our level of access on the site that we brought up. So I'm going to keep that there for a moment, and I'm going to keep that there in this other page that we pulled it out of just for now. User access is helpful. If I have access to the building, there's multiple levels of access. So when I go to the building, one of the access levels is admin, which means I can add other users to the site to work on it. I can adjust permissions for other people, and I have full access to the item if it's a community building or a thing. There's other access that you can set, and one of them is developer access, which developer access to some gives you access to that item explicitly, but not necessarily permissions to change others. The same thing we have positions of graphic artists, and in fact, here's the easy way to do it. Over here we have the table for roles. And let me just return the values. And we have admin, developer, graphics artist. Subscriber just means they've created an account. They're basically users. Architect and guest. Guest is like a subscriber, just identified. Actually, guest is somebody that's using the site that has not created a login, just so we know the difference between subscriber and guest. So when you set up somebody as a different level on the site, that can determine what they're going to be able to see and use in the menus. So it allows us to granular set menu options. Okay, and this whole thing about invitation code, I was designing it to have a bit of a social network type component to it. That piece just yet. But what it is that with the... Okay, so that brings it in as a variable in that site. Okay, so the thing is Oh, it's right there. Got it. Okay, so that's self-contained. Let me get back to here. Okay, so what I wanted to be able to do was you can create a city or town or create your own house and then invite somebody else to join your city. They can create their own house in their own building, and we will get to that. But I'm going to separate that as a plugin by itself so that it's not natively into the core. So if somebody wants to just load up the core and run a business from it, they don't have to have a social network aspect to their particular sites. They can have a city of all businesses for that matters, and not bring in social networking. So I want to make it as a separate plugin. Okay, so we have invitation code here. We'll get rid of that. That's just something that I'm going to work through. And then invitation code, I'm going to take off the variable here, but I'm not going to remove this just yet. I think, yeah, that's a handful of different places in the JavaScript. I'm not going to worry so much about that yet because when I don't want to erase these things. What I'll do is I'll pull them and move them over to the plugin so that they're not natively in the center of the app here. But I don't want to erase anything right now, and I also don't want to get distracted from my point of where I'm going. So for now, I'm going to leave them where they're at, and I'm going to come back here. Since I just took off the variable, it did enough for what I'm trying to do on this particular site. User access, one thing I am going to do with user access is I'm going to move this or copy it into the session so that the user's access is readable as a variable. So user routine public and user access equals nothing at the moment. We'll set the variable at the next part here. So basically I'm not going to need that variable when I do this. It's going to come from here and it's going to write it directly from the database. It's going to tell it what the access is, and then we're going to use it from there. Okay, so I know I'm not going to need that. Okay, community building. These are going to be, let me start with thing ID. Let's see how bad. I'm hoping this doesn't have it in too many places. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and update these then. Okay, so for the users page, that's a variable that gets passed into iframes, so I don't need to do anything there. Okay. File commands, it's an iframe page. Connecting grids, iframe page. Okay, functions, metadata. I'll get metadata. Getting the metadata. Okay, what I want to do here is, this is actually part of a different class now. So I'm updating the class. Okay. Let's see, building and community while I'm there, since I do know that those are the same variables. Same type of thing that I'm doing right now. So that takes care of that one. Functions, load primary script here. This one is going to be the same thing, where we have the community ID, the building ID, and I'm adding one more, and that's going to be straight out thing, because before when I wrote this, I did not expose the, I didn't expose the thing item to the world. We have communities that you can browse directly to in buildings, but I wasn't making it where you could browse just a thing. And as I thought about it, let's say somebody creates a great car and wants to share it, you should be able to bring it up on the screen, drive it around, check it out, see if you like it and everything else, and then if you like it, click, you can add it to your scene. So I just decided for going worldwide, that was going to be a good extension. I already had it in the databases. It had all the fields and everything. I just were blocking them so you wouldn't see them if you're working with a thing. So we'll turn those on. We'll make it available. So now you'll be able to see all three of the integral parts as you're working with this stuff. So, okay, so that's that one. And now we have this one here. What is this? This is images community. Technically, that one, these pages are in the wrong place. This is actually a check login thing. Okay, these are actually in the wrong place because these are, this page is actually an iframe. So I need to move those to the proper place, which, you know, something I just might do next just to make sure they're good. Of course, my session, those are the variables I'm working at. Check login, this has to do with the login page. This is not the same thing, so I'm not worried about these. I've already accounted for all these in the code. I may be just deleting this page. Check URL, that's the page I'm currently working on. This one here. Okay, let's see. Content. Oh, that's content. Automations by WebID. Okay, it's part of the automation components. Okay, so that is a plugin. I'm going to leave that separately. I'll work with those when I'm ready to. Automations, that's the same thing. I've dropped it in that folder. User access. Over here we have connect. Okay, so these pages extend from here. So we're pulling the values in that get read in on the page. That's reading in the okay, so we don't need the connect ones because those are actually separate ones too. So connected folders all fine, and we're good on those. None of these variables for the connect pages are actually being read in from the general core pages. What it is I've nested a number of code pages by including them into the general big page, the web page you actually go to and browse. And many times if I set something, a variable at the top on one of the pages, as you're going through, the code down the page, I may pull that variable and just use it. Well, now that I'm wrapping things into classes, there's just a little notation difference. For example, look at this one right here. What we have is this part right here identifies the class that it's sitting under, and then this part is a variable used or a function that's used within that class. So if I were to pull up, for example, www.connect, if I go to my classes, www.connect, and I bring this open, the first thing I'm doing is I'm creating the class WTW Connect, WalkTheWeb Connect. And now each one of these variables, like public right here, user ID, that is the value that I'm pulling from my code on the other page. So it kind of connects the dots, tells you where it's going, what it's getting, how it's pulling it there. Okay, so that's the reason I was changing the code the way I was. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any so that they end up blank on the page when I use them. So I'll take that one out. I've got that one covered. Now I want to double check and make sure building ID. I got to do each one of these individually because even though some of them come up under everything where they're pretty standard through the code, I was able to find a few from that one page, but I just don't want to miss any because it ends up being pretty ugly if I do. This particular one, I've already remarked out the code. Whenever I use a slash asterisk, that actually marks out the code so that it doesn't execute it. But if I'm looking for this and wanting to know what I'm doing with it, I can change it this way just so that we know it's been handled also. Not a big deal. I'm going to recreate those lists a different way when we get to that part of the code. Iframes, we don't need that. Notice where I'm looking. When I do a search across the site, it gives me a list back on the bottom of the page. And Iframes itself is a folder under my core, which is right here. So anything I know that's in the iframe folder, what they do is they come up as a separate page, which means whenever I had the variable used on that page, it had to be defined on that page. So it's not the same variable, even though it's the same name of the variable, it's actually not the same instance that I'm trying to make sure I don't catch. Okay, going through, and functions. These are the ones that we need to make sure. This particular one, require login. I'm not going to worry about that because I'm catching it at the beginning of the page now, and I'm actually not even doing any of that code. Same thing for check login page. Neither one of these. Oh, I'm going to correct myself here. Let's just say I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to take off require login. I'm going to keep check login there because I'm just going to make sure, remind myself I need to check and get those variables in there. I believe I already did it, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole at this moment since I'm already working on this other page. So, okay, so those are gone. We're good on that page. Functions right here. This one's another one that it is a separate page, should be in the iframes page. I'll correct those afterwards. Init class, this is the actual class that I'm using, so that is the variable defined. That's the correct one. Functions here. Let's see. I missed one right there. That's actually, good catch. That actually is Z. I can tell already by the way the code looks. It's actually supposed to be with a Z, so that passes in the value from these, like Z, building mold, Z, what have you. Each one of these are different pieces that I'm running. Z building mold is actually the top of the function, just to confirm it. I don't want to miss anything. I don't think I had to go this far up to do it. For example, Z copy, and yeah, I know where I am, so I actually know that we're good, but just to reinforce it, if I go up to the top of the function, what it does is the function itself passes in the variable Z building ID, and so I just had to make sure that was set down below. So that was a good catch on that one. And it looks like we got one more right here that got missed. Usually what happens is it scrolls off the side of the page, and for whatever reason I didn't look that far over, or I didn't search the page right, or whatever. So there we go, got that one. And finally one right here. This is building ID, building moles. That should also be a Z building ID. Another reason why I make it that way, my local variables use different naming standards. Z is something that I bring into a function and uses a local variable within that function. So it keeps it, at a glance, I can tell immediately if it's one that got passed into the function or if it's something that was set from another place. Okay, so core functions, check login. This is the one that I'm going to use and correct, so I'm not going to worry about that just at the moment. And check load URL. This part, it's not being used currently, but if I ever do fire it back up, I'll use the other variable. And this is where I'm setting them. I can do it to this one too. Just so I don't forget, I know that, oops. I know that I'm also going to have a thing ID that I bring back. I didn't bring it back before, but this will remind me. Okay, and this one right here. See this building ID. It's actually going to use. Whoa! Let's go back a step. Okay, so I need to do that, and put that there, and also catch that community one. And notice this whole thing is kind of out of whack anyway because I'm sending in the building ID, the community ID, but I'm not bringing in the thing ID, and I've also got a community and building already here. A lot of this particular function, I already know that I'm going to be rewriting it because what it was kind of a one-stop suits all out of a stored procedure, and that was stored directly in the database. Well, the new version is actually putting all the code inline, and so I've broken down the logic and done different steps at different times. So now the need to make it be all one-stop suits all kind of thing isn't there. So now that that's the case, I'm able to do just these parts here. Okay, so let's see, that's that one, it's this, and that's the one I'm getting rid of. Get rid of that. And the rest of them, the components, we don't need that. We don't need that one. Connect, that's another connect file. Anything that's in that connect folder, just like the iframe folder, it's this connect folder down here. Anytime they're in that connect folder, they're the ones that are reachable files from other servers. So they're standalone web pages. They don't share any of the logic of the home page itself. They're direct calls to get the data that another web server is trying to include your building in their website, or your thing that you've created in their website. Okay. So it's a way of extending their site to include your parts. Okay, so check load URL. This is where we were. I've already got those two. That one's already done. And those are all out of there. So next, community ID. Get this one. Same thing goes here. Thank God there's not too many of them. Okay, so iframes. Once again, we don't need those. We don't need to change them because they're independently standalone pages. This particular one here, we're going to change these. Oh, that's the one that should be in iframes. I gotta fix that. Init section, that's the variable we are using. And why is that not being set? When I did the other variables, when I checked them, if I'm not mistaken, oh, they're being set in a different file. Sorry. Okay, so that's all fine. Web alias, this particular one. Get domains, we want this to be. Okay, since we've already given it the variable by there, that will work. And here is another one. I'm going to do it that way. Oh, see, this is the very reason why when I bring something in and I pass a value, I should have used a Z instead. And it's a good catch that I found that now. But when I passed in the value, which means it came in with the function, I want it to use a local variable. We'll see, because I didn't use my Z in my naming standard, it made me miss that. So, okay, so got those ones straight, which means it's better now. I don't want to mess that up. 1, 2, 3, 4 values. Okay, the next one, check login. I'm going to handle that at once. Okay, user access list. Okay, just so we've been there, we have access to that and that. And it's not even a full access list because now that I'm doing the things separately, I would need to, oops. Oh, okay. Yep, community ID, got that. Okay, so that's check load URL. This one here. What page is this? Automations, okay. That's one of the components that we're going to rewrite as a plugin. Another component part. This one, connect to user access. Oh, that's the connect directory. We don't need those right now. And that should take us through the top of the file. They're alphabetical, so it hit all the connect directories together. Okay, so I'm comfortable with those. We go back to init session, or we go back to here. No, wrong one. Okay, let's just scroll to the left when all else fails. And save every once in a while. The more you save, the more we know. Okay, so now I did them in that order because building ID would be found before I do a general search for the word building. Because of course if I do a general search for the word building, I'm going to find everything that has the word building ID in it. So let's start. I figured this one would have more than all the others. So now we have things, as you can see. Well, first of all, iframes don't matter, but building count, for example. So iframes, we don't need that. We don't have to change anything there. Okay, iframes. Functions, here we go. The building count is being set, which is still fine. So we can still have a building count. I haven't done anything with that yet. I'll get to that one when we get to that one. Okay, functions. This one should be its own iframe. This one, building count once again. I'll have to write that when I get there. This one, these are variables that we're using. This is the one I'm going to rewrite. And we're down to, let's see, functions. That's building info. Okay, wait, building right here needs to be WalkTheWeb building. And if I'm not mistaken, there's going to be a community right next to it. Who'd have thought? Okay, so that takes care of that one. And building on the top of the page here. This one, oh, that's the one I'm getting rid of. Okay, and automations, components, connect, we're good to go. Okay, so get rid of that one. And this one. Checking for communities, the word community variable. And once again, iframes are not worrisome. Standalone pages, iframes. Okay, now we're in the functions. Oh, community count is not an issue, at least not right now. Community ID in that page, that's another one that's going to be an iframe. Community count, once again. Okay, in this section, let's see, we have, those are the true ones we're keeping. We have the check login, which I'll get rid of here in a second. And we have community info, that's all fine. We have the community there, that's one we're doing. Okay, so we'll get rid of that one. And now we have community info, community ID, those are all good. Oh, components, and connect. Okay, so we're good on those folders. Let's check one more and just see how much this one's actually used. And I didn't think so. I've already fixed that. Okay, so that one's out of there. Now we're down to the function and the things that it returns. So before I move on any farther, let me go to the one I kept saying let's go to after check login. First thing I'm going to do is find out what pages this is used in. Found in clipboard. Okay, we search all the pages. Okay, and it's used in a number of functions. Oh, those are going to identify every one of the functions that are actually iframes. They're in the wrong place. We're going to fix all those also right now. let's start with those. Because what we got is this. We need to take this page and we'll do them one at a time so that I can make sure I don't miss anything in the code. But technically it is here, core functions, and I like open both folders at the same time because I'll be using them numerous times each time I go to a different file. Okay, here, there, core, and we have iframes. So the ones I'm looking for, first file is files my. Now, I have to say this, I created these 6 files or so. By the time I'm done with everything, chances are I'm only going to need 2 or 3, I think 3 of them. So I've got duplicates that, I created one page that actually was like the build all, use all, do all kind of thing. And so once I did that, I didn't need independent pages on some of the other stuff. So not a problem, will be easy to work with. But at the same time, right now we have files my. This file, we're going to move that file to this other folder. And as soon as I do, it's going to tell me it doesn't have it here anymore. Do you want to keep it in the editor? I've said no. What I want to do is take that word, files my PHP, copy, find, and I'm going to be looking for that in the functions folder. And first we're going to just do a dry shot for it, look for it. Okay, found a number of places, and we're going to just update that so that, oh, 2 places back to back. Yes, core index of that. Okay, it's looking for that. So this one's going to be iframes, and we're going to change it there also. That takes care of those 2. This particular one, we've already moved the file, so we're going to move it to there. That's just the return page. That has to do with something else. I'll get into that later on. Okay, so that page is now relocated. Yes, save changes to that file. The next one from here was images admin. Okay, so we have images admin. Okay, I'm going to grab 3 of these at once. Images admin, images community, and images stock. I know all 3 of these are probably, these are the outdated ones that I'm actually going to get rid of in the long run, but I've got to go through the code and make sure I didn't use them anyplace, and we'll get to that shortly. But for now, moving them to the right directory where they are being used as an iframe is the most important part of the step that I'm doing. So first thing I want to do is open, oops, let's go over here. And iframes, we have images stock, and we're going to file name to clipboard, find that file, find in all files. And from there we have okay, so I have that file there. It's actually going to be in the iframes folder. So we'll copy that. And we have it here. Well, I can actually see images community. Another reason why I grab these both at the same time, and images stock. And images stock. Okay, so that moves that one. Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to have everybody testing it out too. But this site, it'll be a little bit, but well anticipated, believe me. We're getting there. And when it does, the good news is right now, one of the things I'm doing is it's actually streamlining the code so that this is going to be the raw bare minimum, and then everything comes in under plugins. That way people can choose which pieces to load from there on forward. So makes it a really nice pattern, makes it work out well. Okay, so we did the functions images and found them in the clipboard. Okay, we're going to get these pages, and I'm going to update. Oh, okay, so this page is not being used. Yay, we found that out because it's not being called by any other page. Like I said, I knew some of these were being replaced, so I'm going to move it to the recycle bin. And just so you know, I am not working without a net, and I'm not talking a net Funicello. But no, I'm not working without a net. I actually have another copy of the code off to the side, so if I do delete something and then come back later on, I can totally grab the page back or grab code off of it if it ends up being something more that I shoulda, woulda, coulda saved. Okay. Cool. Cool, welcome, yes, and of course, you know, well, I do have a teaching background, just so you know. I've got a doctorate in education, actually. And so basically, basically I'm going through, and I'm kind of doing it as a teaching moment as I go through. So walking through, showing you where things are, helping you find them, the whole bit. So definitely work that way. Okay, so I talk you through the different things. I'll tell you what they are. First code is hello world. I think that's the first code on every single app you ever get. I'm going to have to do some type of hello world in the middle of this code someplace. When you first load it up, when you get your first plugin, I'll have to do some type of, you know, something special. I've got to think about that one. I'll have to get some ideas from everybody listening at the time when I'm ready to do it. But that would be pretty cool. Okay, so images stock got moved over. We had a page back here. This page. Okay, so images stock. Okay, uploaded files. We want to move uploaded files. This file. Found into clipboard. Okay, so here. Oops. Juggling a few different folders at once, and we have uploaded file and uploaded files. These are both iframe pages, so I'm moving them to the iframe folder, and of course that's going to tell me you don't have it open here. Okay, so we want to do this one first. Clipboard. Okay. And from there, this page gets called a lot. See, this is one of the pages where I actually wrote it to be used in a lot of places. So, iframe, and this one should be iframe. Go here. I'm doing them one at a time because I am actually looking at the code and making sure there's nothing strange about where I'm doing these. I could have done a search and replace across all of them, but I find that sometimes you just need to be a little more delicate and see what's around it to notice if it's going to break something else. Especially when you're working on a site that has JavaScript and PHP. Okay, got that one. Get those two. Another thing I do, just as first of all, just so you know, I'm working in Notepad++. Yes, that's Notepad++. I like using it because, first of all, because it's free and everybody can get it. So once you get Notepad++, it makes a big difference for being able to use it. You can get it anywhere. Anybody else can open it, and they can always make it look the same way that I'm doing. Yes, it's free. Just look up Notepad++ downloads. It's free forever. The guy who wrote it, so far it's been free. I know the forever, I can't hold your breath. I don't know. It's always been free for as long as I know. And if they ever change it, then we'll go to another one that's free. But I believe it's open source. So Yeah, so since it's open source, that makes it a lot easier. We're able to download it. We can always keep a copy of the way it is at the time. There's a lot of people that also set up different plugins for the thing. Let me take 1 second here. Notice that there's a plugin administration. You can actually turn on different plugins and download them to Notepad++. A couple of them that are my favorite is I like the compare function, so I can open up 2 pages, like one that I coded a month ago and one that I have now, and try to see some changes if I have a problem and want to search what's been changed recently. There's a spell check, some mime tools for base encoding, and some of these just put in the some of the auto fill type stuff for you. And Notepad++ export allows you to bring things in and out. Some of that stuff comes standard anyway. So let's see. Okay, so getting back into here, just to double check. The other thing is, while I'm doing them, when I do a search across all files, the good part is I like the way it highlights the different things in different colors. You can see what page it's on. You get the full path so that you can find out if you need to adjust something or not. The other part is when you click on it, it goes right to it. And without clicking on the page, I can actually paste something that replaces the item that's highlighted. So in this case, it would be uploaded files.php. So just by clicking on that, I can actually move around. I'm just going to replace the word iframe, so I'm doing something near it, but not on it per se. That one's fine. I don't have a path issue there. And this one actually is iframes there. Okay, and then also you can accordion close them as you've checked them. So by default it opens them all up, and then as you're going you can actually close them so that's easy to work with. So I want to, that one's that one, then we have one here, and the final one here. We'll go into that stuff later on. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's see, continuing on. We did uploaded files, but now I need to do uploaded file, which is right here. File name to clipboard, find all instances. Hey, thanks for stopping by, no problem. We'll catch you on Mondays if, we'll see you then. Okay, so going on. Let's see, we found it in a number of places, so I'm going to go ahead and iframes. And I'm going to go here, uploaded file, we're good there. This one, uploaded file is the actual page. And iframes here. And because I'm meticulous about what I'm doing, I had a feeling that I might have typed iframe instead of iframes, so I'm going to do a search across it real quick and double check. Oh, I didn't want to search for iframes. I want to search for iframe and see if I missed the S on some of them, because there is no iframe folder. It's iframes. Yes, there they are. Told you. Glad I recognized that now instead of later. I would have found it eventually. And once you find one, you do a search across all pages and you fix them all anyway. So, yeah, we got one right there too. Okay, that was that one. Okay, we've got one here. Boy, I'm consistent. Once I started messing up, I messed up in a lot of places. But I caught it before I moved on, which is also a good thing. Okay, got those. So now I moved those files over to the iframes folder where they belong. The other thing that I ran into while we were doing these files is, okay, we have a common iframe, and that is now a class, correct? No, that's JavaScript, sorry. Okay, let's close that one. Automations and buildings, I don't need that one open right now. Okay, require login. First of all, let's do a search for that file name. You know, it's funny that the more you program, the more when the file gets bigger, like you're sitting here coding away, and all of a sudden you see that the file keeps on getting bigger and bigger, you go, man, I did a lot of coding today. And you see, man, 10,000 lines of code in this one file and 20,000 in this other file. And sometimes that's your accomplishment for the day, is that you got a lot done and you coded a lot of new code. Then there's other days where you actually remove things that you didn't need. And it has that same feeling of justification, because you go, hey, cool, this code works the same as it always did, and now I use less lines to do it. So it actually runs more efficient and runs faster. So it's kind of a cool thing that, that it does work that way. Okay, so the other one, let's see, what's this? Oh, the admin page is the core page, so we're going to require login. I'm not going to get rid of that just yet. I've got to take a look at that separately and make sure that I'm telling it that we need to require login when I'm on that page. So that one is kind of my reminder. You know what I'll do? I'll remark out the code so that it doesn't execute it, but we're gonna check for login. I'm going to just make myself a little little note here. We call it a mental note, but I actually wrote it out. Okay, the other one is I'm pulling it off of these pages, because when I convert the pages, the iframe pages, to code, I'm actually already doing this part of the code in the class that I'm wrapping in it. So if that makes sense. Okay, we don't have to have it included in those pages anymore. Now it's not being used anywhere in my code. And obviously I've already deleted the things out of it, so there's no reason for it to be here in the folder, and we get rid of another file. Yay, file gone. Crack myself up. Okay, next. After that one, there was another file that I wanted to make sure I got rid of. I'm going to close all to the right of that. I love that function about this programming tool also. When I click on something, I can close all to the right, all to the left, all but this item. It really helps with when you're working on something, you do a search, and every time you click on a page, it opens that page. Well, after a while, you end up with a whole stream of new files that you've opened. But if I just right-click on one of them and say close all to the right, everything gets rid of at once. So very nice, friendly tools for coding. Okay, user access, I don't need that one right now. Okay, so check login. This is the next one I'm going to check. File name to the clipboard. Let's see how many places actually use this file. Okay, so this one's using a number of them, and they're all in the iframes, which is a good news because that's a section that I am working on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the contents of this file. What happens is when we use a file, check login. Okay, when we use a file in code, what it actually does, it required once in this case, what it's doing is it's including that code exactly as written right where the require once file is. So it's what we call including file. So the file, the code that we're running through goes right through the page, and then all of a sudden it goes, oh, require once this file. It goes to that file, figures out what's inside of it, and then puts that on the page. So it's a notation where you can repeat this same code on a page just by including that file. Makes it real friendly for going back and forth between, by doing a lot of repetitive code, you can have one line of code and just one file where everything's in it. The other part that makes it a real advantage is you can actually go in there, you can hit the one file, the one piece that you're dealing with, and you can change something there and it affects every place that it's being used. For the same reason we wrap things in classes, which is most of the process of what I'm currently doing. So by wrapping things in classes, it becomes reusable. We can pull it up from other pages, fairly simple, by including it and then calling the class. And so that is the part that I'm doing. These pages I'm recoding, I'm actually wrapping into classes. I just want to remember that they use this particular bit of information, but I'm going to get rid of the other page, because the includes page, because I already know I don't need any of this stuff with the new class that I already created for it. So just to be thorough, I'm getting rid of the file first, kind of backtracking from the normal process of creating a included file. Okay, so that goes there. And what else do I have? I have a couple more. I put some blank spaces around it because it brings my eyes to it, helps me segregate what part of the code I'm changing, what part came from what file and stuff before it's the other things. It's a friendly way to do it. When I finish my code, it looks pretty straight out and formatted well by the time I'm done. So okay, and let's see. Well, if you like what I'm doing, just so you know, what I'm building is 3D Internet. I'm making an open source project of it, so you can watch me code it. I created a site on my own hosted server. I copied over the code, and from that, I'm making the open source version. And that means I'm globalizing all the variables so that they're easy to use. I'm making it so we can create plugins and drop different components right into a 3D scene. Let's say you have a great car that you built in Babylon or directly in Blender. You can export them to be Babylon files. We use a Babylon engine. And then once you do that, then basically you can drop them right into the scenes, and you can actually distribute it as a plugin. I'm thinking freemium. That way you can have something for free that you can give out, and you can also code things so that people can pay money to do upgrades for you. But just the same way, kind of equivalent to what WordPress does with traditional websites and plugins, I'm doing the same thing with a gaming engine and creating gaming components. So it's going to be all over the internet. That's what I'm working to do, and that's why we're going to make it open source so anybody can host an instance of it, and that's what we're going to do. So what you're seeing right now is me working on that particular instance. Another piece is, just so you know, on Mondays I do a show and tell and also Q&A and everything else. During the week I'm coding and trying to get in as much time as I can. So if you have any questions or concerns or anything else like that you'd like to ask, or you want to see some demos of stuff that I've created or things that we're working on to create, show up on Monday at noon. That's Pacific time, California. And you're welcome to join us for that, and you'll be able to see what it is. If you'd like to know when I'm off and on the line, just go ahead and, man, that on the line. I tripped over those words so big that I made it sound like the movie where the interns try to get into Google. Okay, so, yeah. But, so if, please follow me so you'll know when I'm broadcasting, and I'd love to have you join in. And if you're a coder, definitely make yourself known, because I'm looking for people that want to assist in coding and also want to be able to create plugins with it. And I'll work with you creating plugins when we get to that stage, and we'll definitely build a community of this. So, okay, so moving on. I'm checking to make sure that I don't have this listed in my code anywhere. Okay, so this file's done. I'm going to move to the recycle bin. And we've eliminated another file out of the code that we're not using. Okay, we have, check load positions. This is another one of those files that had a snippet of code, and as I rewrote the beginning of the code, there was actually no reason to have this in here anymore. So I'm going to remove that from there. I'm going to also check, one other part of that was there is one declaration here. Let's make sure I'm not using that anywhere. And I'm not, so that's easy enough. Goodbye to that file. Move to recycle bin. Another file out of here. Yay! Code is getting smaller and cleaner by the moment. Okay. So load URL. Okay, this code, what it does is it's pulling the site name, gravity settings. Okay, this pulls the initial city out, the scene stuff. So like setting the sky for the scene, texture for the ground, the community name, the building name, the ground position of where the user's going to be when they come into the scene. We have a starting location set by position, scaling, and rotation. So what it does is it uses whatever scene we're doing. Okay, so what I've done already, just to catch up a couple steps here, when I initiate the scene, the session, I'm separating out the host. I'm bringing up the path. I separate the path into logical parts of community, building, and thing, so that you can browse certain segments of it just by calling it by friendly names. Now, from those friendly names, of course, in our database, we're not using the friendly names. We're actually using an ID. So the next thing I've done is I've created a process here. I've created a function that takes the different parts and figures out what the ID is for each part so that we know which ones we're looking for, and I set those. So the final part of this is going to be loading the initial scene data. So I'm just going to copy a couple lines here just so I don't take too long typing. Okay, kind of my format of a function. Okay, so this next one is going to be get initial scene data. Well, that's kind of get. Let me look at the code again. What am I doing? I am getting the gravity, the sky. Yeah, let's set the scene. We'll call it setting the scene. Helps if I can. Scene. Once you mess up the word, you can't type it straight no matter what you do. Okay, get scene setting. I'll call it that. And we're going to call that after we've gotten the host. Okay, now this one, what we're going to do with it is we're going to translate. If you're just catching up with me, what I've done is when I first wrote this code and did it on my own host server, all of the I used stored procedures, and now with the code, what I've done is I'm actually pulling out the logic from the stored procedures and writing it up as separate pieces as needed. So with that said, what I want to do, I might make this two different SQL statements instead of the original one, because the original one is actually very ugly. Just to show you, the original statement did a lot more, and now I've already done half of what it did, so there's no reason to use the initial statement. But in there, okay, get domain info. Let me show you the original stored procedure. Okay. That's so wide. Okay, so here, the thing is, this is one long stored procedure, and there's different else if statements, a couple different ones of different things I might do based on which pieces I'm actually bringing in. Now, the reason I did that was because, first of all, you can have up to the 3 different parts: community, building, and thing. If you label all 3, I want your starting point to be in front of the thing. If you do 2 of them, I want you to be in front of the building. If you only do community, then I want you to be right in front of the community. If you do like a building within a community, you should be in front of that building in reference to where it is in that community. Same thing for a thing within a community or within a building. So with all that said, there's a little bit of a gap of where it puts it, and depending on the configuration of which ones of those you've given me and the path you're trying to find determines where the starting point's going to be. But instead of doing that as one logical statement, just sending in, here's what I got, figure it out, send it all back to me, complete. Instead of that approach, what I've actually done is I've reversed the logic. I already know the IDs of the 3 different things and which ones have them. So now that I already have that, all I need is to take, first of all, the community, which the community is the only one that actually has the scene settings. So the sky and the ground and those kind of settings are only part of the scene. If you bring up a building or a thing by itself, I create the default scene for you. So it'll have a dirt ground, it'll have a sky, and basic things, but it's basic, just as minimum loaded but complete. So when you actually bring up a community scene though, I give you a lot of control of what texture's on the ground. If there's a water level, you can lower the ground water level and then use different land formations to bring the water back up above the water level. There's some things you can do. There's all kinds of settings like that. Notice we have the ground position and water positions. We have the starting locations and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back just the community items and wrap those together as one, and then I'm going to bring the starting position and append them to that. So the starting position's only going to be based, in fact, I'll search the starting location first, because the starting location has to do with if there was a, if it's a thing, if it's a building, or if it's a community that is listed. Okay, since I've already done the validation, the only thing I have to do in my query. Okay, so here I'm going to bring back results equal WalkTheWeb database query, and what I'm going to query, the statement I'm going to write. First of all, I want to know. I got to do a if statement. I need to know which one I'm getting. So if not empty, and then I'm going to do WalkTheWeb variables, and we're going to do thing ID. If that's not empty, which means it has a value, then in fact we'll do one statement. So we'll just do SQL equals blank, and then SQL equals, and now we're going to write the statement of what we want to bring back for the position of that particular thing. I don't think I did the math on the back end. I believe. Let me confirm that. When I bring back something, for example, there's the world matrix of everything in it. That's the scene, that's the community. The world matrix is the community 3D scene. The building has its own coordinate system, and it's XYZ coordinates based off of 0, 0, 0 of the building. When I bring back a value and it is the value of the building, it's in relation to the building, which means if I came in here and said, here's the coordinates, here's what they are, I have them in position to the building, I need to transform those, translate them into the community based on the rotation of the building, the position of where it was within the building, and so there's some math involved. I'm not going to do the math here in front of you because I'm probably going to get it right and wrong 20 different times as I perfect it and make sure I did it right. Or I'll be searching for a half hour in my code to find out where I've already done it and pull it back up so I don't have to do it again. I think I already have it all transformed, and I wrote JavaScript procedures to be able to do it between them, because I know Babylon includes a lot of that in their root stuff too. So I can tell it, hey, in relation to this piece, then I can translate the coordinates and stuff to the world view. But in this particular case, let me look under here. First of all, when I bring back, that's not it. Get domain info, procedure. Yeah, I closed this one off. Okay, so when I bring back the values, did I do any math? No. I brought them back knowing which one I brought back. So connecting grid positions. Yes, here's the deal. Okay, so what I do is I bring back the building positions, which would be where it is in the building. I bring back the connecting grid positions, which means what it's in relationship to. So in this case, if it's a building, it would be in relationship to the community. The connecting grid is the map of where in the community the building is and the scale, position, and rotation that it takes on at that point. So with that said, I bring back the values, and I think I've already done all the math on this other side. And I can tell you right now, just thinking ahead, I not only did that, but I did it wrong. No, when I get it back, what I got to do is I realized that I did the rotation and the position when I was calculating it, but I don't think I accounted for the scale, which would mean that it could be proportionally off. Let's say you did a half scale object. When you show up, you're going to be at a full scale location. I'll get to that. I'll make myself a note. That's not one of the things. It's nice to recognize these things as I'm coding, because it's kind of like aha moments of it's going to be an issue when I get to it. But going off in rabbit holes when you're coding is not a good thing, because you never get back to the one you started with. So what I like to do is I keep a little to-do list as a text box, and as I think of these things, as I think of them, then I drop them into here, and when I finish something, if I'm going, okay, what do I work on next? Or let's say I know I've got an hour I can work on code, I'll go look in this list and go, oh, I can knock that out in an hour, and I'll pick up something and knock it off the list. So this list grows and shrinks constantly, but it's all good stuff. Every once in a while I have to just look at the list to see, hey, did I already fix that and not even realize it was on the list? So, okay, start point based on building or thing is not using scaling values. Okay, that'll be enough of a reminder. Once I put enough of it, I dig in. Next thing you know, I'll find and expose the whole section and fix it all. Okay, save that file in case I accidentally close it at some point in time. Shrink it down. Okay, so now what I brought back in here, though, was the position of the communities. Okay, position. I bring back the position of the items. Okay, we're going to be working on this section a little bit, and after we get the site up and going, I'm going to be coming back in here, and I know I'm going to be adjusting different things in this part. But for now, what I'm going to do is, if the thing exists, I want to know the thing value. Okay, we need to know a couple things. Well, let me go through my chain of thought here. The first thing I need to know is what are, for that particular thing, is there an XYZ coordinates of where it sits. Now, most of the XYZ coordinates of, oh wait, that'd be the XYZ coordinates of the start position for that particular thing. So let's go ahead and get those. Select. I want to know if it's scaled. No, all I need is XYZ start positions. Let's look in the table. I want to see my values. I think it's just... Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking in the things table and the column names, and what I have is, I don't even have them listed here. Okay, like I said before when I created these, what I have is buildings, and notice there it is, position XYZ, scaling XYZ, and rotation XYZ. Those values have to do with your starting position for your user. And when I created the things table, we do not have those listed here. So what I want to do is I want to add them. Easiest way to do that, buildings, alter table, come in here from there to there, copy those so we get kind of the same look and feel and where they sit. And okay, now I'm going to open up the things table, alter the table, and go here and why didn't it paste? Oh, I know what I did. Okay, so position through rotation, here through there, right click, and it's, let's see if it'll copy to paste. There we go. Okay, so grab the values. And the other part I like to be consistent about is it's right after user ID. So since we have a user ID there, the reason I'm noting that is because when I click apply, it's going to say on the first field, it's going to say put it after deleted, and I like to put it consistently in the same place on the other tables. Now, another part of this is when we have it create the tables on default. There's a table. Anytime I modify a table, before I move on, just to make sure I don't miss anything, is there's a class for table definitions. And in this case, I'm going to, let's see, buildings, let's find buildings. Okay, so table buildings, and I'm going to take, just like I did off the other thing, I have these fields. Now I'm going to go down to things and table things. I'm going to go right after user ID, and I'm going to put that in there. Now that's the scaling, position, and rotation of the user when they start in this scene. Okay, so now when I create this table by default, it'll automatically have it with some starting values. Basically, those starting values, we may have to modify those later when we adjust a few things, but what that is you're standing off a little bit to one side, looking at the object. At 0, 0, 0 is where the object sits, and you can walk up on it that way. Okay. So now I've added it to the table defs. So now it'll exist whenever I do it. See, because when I first did it, I manually entered them in by doing the table here. So then I want to make sure that when I use my install process, it also ends up with the same results for having a table with those fields in it. Okay, we will, once I get all that situated and we're done coding it, we will be testing the install practice directly from scratch so that we can uncover any kind of things like this that, you know, have a problem from the very start, that don't load, that miss a table field, that, you know, trip on anything. Okay, let me get a little sip. My favorite cinnamon tea. It'll be a trivia question one of these days. I'll ask you, okay, guess what's in my cup, and if you get it right, then I'll give you some bonus points or who knows what. But someday that'll be a question that I ask everybody. And those of you that are loyal and here soon and sticking around, you'll be the ones that know that. It is cinnamon tea, cinnamon apple tea. Code name. No, just kidding. Okay, so where was I? Get back to domain info. That's the stuff I'm bringing back. We're going to get back into our class. Okay, so moving on to here. There we go. Now I'm on the page I'm using. Okay, so I don't need to bring back everything because there's a lot of fields here, and the only real things I need are, I could bring back the thing name, which is here. I could bring back, well, let's bring back some things. Let's see. This part, I bring back the position, and then the second query is going to bring back the scene for the community. I think we're going to be okay, because when it loads the thing itself when you're in the scene, I already have it designed to read in the name and everything, so it's already going to know. The only thing I really need is I need to know the position so I can drop them in the right place. As soon as they're in that position, my code will take over, see that you're within an area, and it'll automatically load everything you can see within that area. So it's already sophisticated enough to catch all those parts. So the only thing I'm actually looking for to do here is to bring in the position X. Yeah, I'll just write it out going out sideways. Position Y, position Z, rotation X, rotation Y, rotation Z, and scaling. Scaling X, scaling Y, and scaling Z. Okay, so if I bring back those values, what I like to do is just for my formatting, I do it this way. From, and then I need that to be from things. Where did that come from? Okay, from things. Okay, why is it? Some autofill is doing something. There we go. I don't know what I was bumping. Okay, so from things where thing ID equals I've already validated it by this point because I actually checked to see if it exists, if it's been deleted, if it works, if it doesn't. I've already checked all the validity before I ever get to this point. So by the time I get here, I already know it's there. I already have checked it. I know that's multiple database checks, but there's a reason. It got validated as it brought back from a name. I don't want to confuse too many things in one place. What I could do in the future, and it may save a little bit, it's not going to save a lot, but it'll save a little bit, is when I bring back the each individual, if it's a true thing, a true building, or a true community, I could bring back those 3 different various points. But the problem is, it depends on which ones you're showing to which position I'm going to use, and if I need to also compensate for other measurements. For example, if it has a, if it's connected, how it's connected, like the connecting grids. If there's a connecting grid, which means that it has a position that has to be altered based on it. If it has any scaling, if it has rotation, all these different things have to take in consideration. So it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily straightforward. And if I did it in the other place, when I'm checking to see if it exists, then I'm actually doing it 3 times if there's 3 different things, when all I really need is the one that the position's actually going to be on. So, yeah, one of those dozen in one and half a dozen in the other. Okay, so coding away, we have, let's see, I have thing ID. And that's going to give me the thing that I want. Like I said, I already know that it's not going to be 0. If I could do and delete it equals 0, then I know it's there. So just to have it. Okay, so that one brings back. You know what? Debating if I want to just. Well, let's just do it this way. Okay, so we know the SQL statement. We know we want to bring back these values. So let's go ahead and bring back those values. Oops. That's what I want. Okay, so equals 1. Okay, so the results equals that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to first read in. We're going to do some local variables. Position X equals 0. Position Y equals 0. Actually, yeah. Position Z equals 0. Rotation X equals 0. Rotation Y equals 0. And finally, rotation Z equals 0. And scaling X equals 0. And of course, all these I need to keep with my own notation. Consistency. Yeah, okay. Scaling. Okay, so from these values, what we're going to do is we're going to read the results. We're going to read in what we have here. We have for each results as row. And I already know that I'm getting these values, but what I'll do is assign those local variables. I have a little function I created that validates each value in case there's a null there or whatever else, but let me just do it this way for now. Since I'm creating something that works across the internet, one of the things that I end up doing is that I have to make sure that whenever I get data, it's scrubbed. It's scrubbed like you and believe and validated to make sure that it's exactly what I'm looking for. So the fact that somebody could walk into, even though my app checks all the values and writes them to the database, I know that I don't put nulls in when I'm expecting it to be at least a 0. But what if somebody went directly into the database, changed values, or deleted a column and added it again, or anything in the database? We never know what's going to happen on the administration side of something. So when I write code, even though I'm expecting a certain value, a certain thing, I always go through and check the code anyway, that when I bring something back out of the database, it's exactly as I expected. Now, I take it a step farther when I'm doing things because I would rather it work wrongly in some cases than to fail to work at all. The one thing is I don't want to ever show an error to somebody, so I definitely don't want errors. So that's one thing. If it's going to straight out error, it's going to straight out error, and I have a lot of error trapping to catch, locate, find, and fix, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, what I have is also, for example, if I'm expecting a position XYZ to come out of the database and it ends up with a null value, of course, when I try to do my calculations with that value, it's going to have an issue. But if I check the value as it comes in, to make sure that it's not a null, if it is a null, I set it to a value, for example, 0. Now the calculations don't fail, but instead of your avatar starting in a certain location in front of your building, it starts at 0, 0, 0 in your building. Perfect. It's at ground floor 0, right in the middle of your building. So it makes that option, that functionality, an addition. As long as it's working right, it'll be an addition to the experience, but never take away from the experience, because the experience still happens even if something happened with the way it's laid out. Okay, so that takes care of that piece. I'll come back in and validate those values. That's not an issue right at the moment. Okay, so I know I just gave a lecture on that and then I didn't do it. Okay, caught myself in that one. Let's go ahead and do it. I have a number of functions I want to see. I think they're part of the DV one. And what they do is this. I have, if it's a valid, I'm looking for valid IDs that have to be a certain number of characters. I'm looking for, those are admin access related. And I didn't put in the class there. That means I must have put it, or I didn't put it in this class at all yet, which if that's the case, we're going to fix that too. Here, the only other place it'd be is here. I have session IP, host, get those, track page views. Okay, I have not set them up to be part of this function yet. So in my connect function, what I have is, they're right here. I have functions like get val. Okay. I want to see, I just want to double check where they're sitting and where I'm using them. Okay, connect pages, obviously, because that's the connect function. And of course, target value comes in with that same name, so I don't need all of those. Okay, so would I have that? You know what, let me see where I've defined the function. That'll be the easiest way. Okay, I've only defined it in 2 places, and none of them are being used by the index page or the administrative page, which means I want to bring these 4 different values. These 4 different functions, I'm going to load them into the init session because they get used so much. If I put them in here, then now what will happen is they'll also update my location. If there's an error, I can pinpoint which page caused it. These are my data scrubbing pieces. Now, when I want to work on this site, if I turn out that, hey, something's coming through and it's not working right, or there's some piece, the good part is if I use these little functions, I can come into one place and fix it for the whole entire site. I don't have to worry about going in and fixing it for all these other places. Now, see this one in particular called check number. What this does is it validates, it brings in a value, and then it tries to see if it's empty or null, and then it checks to make sure it's a number. So if a letter comes through here, if the word null comes through, if it's alphanumeric, if it's alpha instead of numeric characters, it'll catch that, and it only sends it back to me if it's a true value. And if it didn't, then it already assigned it a 0. So if this fails and it can't find it as a true number, it's already going to give me a 0. So what I end up with is, no matter what, at least a 0. So I've got the check number function, and all I have to do on my code, just scrolled away from it here. Okay, so then all I have to do here is WTW, WalkTheWeb, by the way, that's what that stands for, WTW, and I'm going to put each one of these into this. Now I've got at least a 000 position when the value comes through. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, when I bring those values back, the next thing I need to check is, in this instance, when I'm using this piece in this community, I need to see, first of all, is it in a building? Is it in a, how are they related to each other? So now I need to check 2 different things. I need to check to see, if it's a thing by itself, I already have the value, I'm standing in front of it, it's related to 000, because the world grid becomes the same 000 reference as this grid. So I don't even have to worry about it if that's the case. But if I'm going to, but if this thing that I'm bringing up right now happens to be within another piece, then what happens is this. Let me show you some live data of my other site, and I'm going to show you connecting grids. Now, in the connecting grid, this is what we have. We have parent web type, which tells me, I didn't mean to sort them. Okay, because now I've got another, well, okay, parent web type is blank. Let's go parent web type equals community. I just want to spell it right, would be good. There we go. Okay, so what happens is this. If I'm opening up a community, this is where it tells me the relationships of the things that are in the community. So I use the parent web ID that identifies which community I'm talking about, and then from there it tells me, oh, this particular case, there's a thing in it, and here's the relative position of where that item is in relationship to this community. Okay, and the scaling is the scaling of the object after it. Now, how that comes into play is this. When I have an object, a thing, and then I look up in this table and find out that the thing is entered directly into the community, for example, what I'll find is, first of all, XYZ position of the thing, which means you can already picture the math in your head. Let's just take the X value. If I have a thing and my X value of where I'm standing is 10 units away, so a positive 10. Now, if the center of this item is now placed into a different grid, a community, and it's placed wherever, let's say it's 20 positions X value, then what happens is my guy would be standing 30 positions, because you're adding the 20 plus the 10, to get it to where he's sitting, where I need to have his start position at. Now, if you, of course, you can picture that with XYZ coordinates. That would be X coordinates, Z coordinates. Your ground is actually X and Z coordinates. And then Y coordinate would be how high up it would be in that, from that plane. So you have to add the XYZ coordinates to the community placement of that thing within it, XYZ coordinates. So you'd have X of the thing plus X of the community position, for where it's placed in it. Then you would have Y of the thing plus Y of the community, plus then Z of the community plus Z of the thing, and you end up in your three-dimensional space where it's at. Now that would tell you the starting position if there wasn't rotation. So now you basically add them together. It could be a negative direction or positive, so it can be wherever it's shifted to, and height, and three-dimensional space, it tells you where it's at. Well, now what if you take that item here? Okay, I have something in. There we go. We'll use a WalkTheWeb pen, yes. Okay, so now, let's say this point right on this end is 0, 0, 0 of this thing. That's where it's at, and at the end of this is where the person stands, right in front of it. So here's the community. I'm placing this in the community at XYZ coordinate, and now what happens when I rotate it? Now you don't just add XYZ, you have to take the XYZ, you have to take this position as the origin of the rotation and add or remove the angle of the rotation from the positioning. So he's 10 feet away, but if he's turned this direction, he's not 10 feet on the x-axis, he's 10 feet on the z-axis. So by doing this, we have to do the math to using sine, cosine in each one of the planar directions. So you can have an xz plane and figure out the rotation this way, but if it also rotates this way, now you've got a whole nother dimension to your rotations. Okay, now that was complex but understandable. I just wanted you to understand the complexity of what's going to happen, because now we take that same thing and we have a community, we have a building in the community placed somewhere, rotated somewhere, and then we put a table and chairs inside of that building. Now we're doing a third level of calculations based on where the thing is in relation to the building, and then where the building is in relation to the community. So as you can tell, that gets very complex very quick. One of these days, we'll jump into that part of the calculation, not today, but right now what I'm trying to do is I'm actually returning the different values that are going to be used to do that computation. So the first thing we needed in this case is if thing is not empty, which means there's a thing that we're dealing with on this scene. And remind you, I don't have to worry about multiple things or multiple buildings at this point. What I'm calculating right now is the starting position for an avatar if you used a URL that supplied a community, a building, and a thing. I'm trying to figure out where your starting point would be. Now, notice, once we do that one, that's the hardest one of the bunch, because then you can do half of that formula and go, well, if we're in a building, there's no thing. Now I only need to be positioned to the building compared to the community. And finally, if I only open the community, tell me where I'm at. I just have to read the value. So it becomes easier the less pieces we have added to the path. Now, one other thing that I'm going to include in here that will be part of this is I'm going to give you the option in the code where you can actually overwrite these values, and I won't even have to read them, but you can actually tell it an XYZ position, an XYZ rotation, and even an XYZ scaling if you'd like. Yeah. Actually, XYZ position and rotation would be in relation to a a community level. So I don't even have to worry about scaling at that one, because the scaling happens after the fact. Community is one size. I scale the building on the community. So if I'm positioning for the community, there's no scaling involved. If I'm related to the building and its position, now there's scaling involved. And then, of course, a thing within the building, there's scaling involved twice. Okay, so with all that said, that was a mouthful, and with all those pieces said, I'm going to give you a way that you can actually come in here with a XYZ position and rotation, and you would be able to use it as part of your URL to take somebody to something exact within any scene. The reason for that is, in fact, we'll give you a menu item where you can just click it. Now you've got the URL, or even save a bookmark. But you can copy the URL or you can paste it. And what it'll be is a more complete URL than what you actually see up in the header. The reason is, while you're moving around, we know where you are in the community space of seeing and moving, angling, looking up, looking down, climbing, moving, XYZ coordinates, the whole bit. So when you, let's say you had a business, or let's say I found something and I'm trying to tell the developer, hey, by the way, you need to take a look at this. It doesn't render correctly or something. I will be able to walk right up to it, click a button, and send you that URL, and you'd be able to stand exactly where I'm standing, loading up the scene, and then look from the same frame of reference I had on my screen. You'll know exactly what to check. So it gives us a complete way of not only browsing the scenes and things, but having any starting point within that scene that you actually want to have. Okay, so after I've checked the thing, now I need to know based on the building that it's in. So this is going to use this thing value and if there's a building value. So the first thing I want to do is, okay, if thing value is not empty, it's still going to be within this function. Okay, so if not empty, and this one's going to be the building ID, thank you. Okay, if it's not empty, then I'm going to do this function, which is going to be, okay, we're going to get this piece right here. This function is going to be the same kind of idea of this one, except okay, so now in this one, the select statement that we actually want to do is we're going to select position XYZ, because let me remind you back here. We're looking at the connecting grids. I'm going to go back to our table in the new version, connecting grids, and the columns that we have. Notice there's a position, scaling, and rotation. So now we have to, what we're looking for is we're looking for a connecting grid that has those items, and from connecting grids, and it's going to be where not the thing ID, but the child web ID equals the thing ID, and the parent web ID is equal to the building ID. Okay, so now what we're testing out is that thing really in this building? Because if it's not in this building, then all we need is the thing value. We're standing in front of it. There's no actual building. There's no reference point of where this would actually sit. So by checking this, we're actually detecting, is that correct? Is this thing actually in this building, so I can find it and position you in front of it? So also child web ID and parent web ID. Since we have community IDs, community ID, building ID, and thing ID, the word web ID refers to the class of all three of those. So if it's a web ID, it means it's one of those three items, but this is the global name for all three of them. So if I said web type, I'm looking for a building, a community, or a thing. If I said web ID, I'm looking for a building ID, community ID, or a thing ID. In the same way, the parent and web, we're looking at the relationship. Which one is hosting this thing? So now, since I have this thing, and I know what building we're trying to call up that this thing is in, because I've had to label out those 3 levels to get to this position. So by doing that, we now have, if it returns any results, and that's an if it returns results, what we have is a Z position, and now we have to do those calculations. So what I want to do to simplify things is, first of all, we have to apply the movement to the original, the scaling to the original items, the rotation, and then the positioning. Okay, we're getting deeper in this. For today, I'm going to put a B for building, because I don't want to spend too much time on the calculation right this minute, because it's kind of going down a rabbit hole of calculations. Okay, so we're going to calculate it based on those. We're bringing back those values, and then what I'm going to do is right in here, I'll be doing some type of, I'll put the note in here, calculate values based on connecting grid. Okay, and also I'm only looking for one connecting grid. There shouldn't be more than one, because what that would mean is that you're placing more than one item right over the top of each other, but then there's some other mistakes involved in that, because they would have to have the same publish name to have the basic same thing ID. So it would be at most one item coming back from the connecting grid table, unless somebody has a hosed data set or something in their tables. Maybe something got duplicated or whatever. But even then, I protect myself by saying limit 1. I'm only expecting 1. If there's more than 1, I'm taking the 1 that I find first. Many times, depending on what I'm doing, I'll also do a sort by on these type of items, so that it sorts by the creation date, and what I take is always the first one that was there, so that if somebody else messes up, something happens to the database, another piece gets added in there, it would only take the first one that always existed. That way, when I'm working in my code, I can always search for the first one and replace that and fix it as being the updated one anyway, and any additional ones that it finds are basically always ignored. So that's a good safety measure. Takes a little longer in the SQL statement to execute when you have to sort a record set, because when you tell it limit 1, it just looks down, finds the first one, and goes, we're done. Whenever it does a sort, it means it has to go down, find, and look through the end of the record set to see if it's going to find a second one. Then it sorts, then it picks which one it does. So it takes a little longer on the SQL side of things. Now, if you have a fast SQL server and it's a small statement, and if you have it indexed, especially when the tables become larger, if it's indexed right, then it should happen fast anyway. It's not an issue. But like I said, we're not going to do that on this part, because that's only correcting for a data error. That's a bit far down the road, because there's going to be other symptoms of that. We're going to see them, like when you bring up the scene and there's actually 2 items placed in the same place, that your mesh count would be doubled, your scene would have all kinds of issues. Okay, so I know that I'm going to do calculate values based on connecting grid, and what that's going to do is I don't have to bring these variables outside of this, because I'm going to translate these values that I've already got outside the function here, so that these are my correct values based on the new data that I got based on where it's placed. Now, because of that, I have to do this one more step farther, and I have to check it based on the community. So because a thing can have 3 levels, this one would be if the community ID, and we have the thing. We have to check to see well, there's ways to check if the thing is directly in a community or if the thing is directly in, yeah, I know. Okay, so I'm going to assume that at this point, I know it's a small assumption. because I have those other checks in place. If I didn't have those other checks in place, then it might not be a small assumption. But what I'm going to do is say that the child web ID is my building, and I'm looking to see the community ID. So now what I'm doing is I found the thing, picked which building it's in. Now I'm looking at the building, picking which community it's in. So by bringing back those values where they're in this relationship, now I know that for this particular one, I will have each one of these values coming back, and they're going to be the community position of where that building is. I'm using just a C. I might spell this out all the way just for I might spell it out just because if somebody else looks at my code afterwards. Let me do it this way. This will do it. Okay, so this one is where the thing is within a building. Okay, and this one is where the building is within the community. So 3 different levels of values. We're going to have to take those. We're going to have to do the calculations based on that. And then we're going to have to come up with, that'll give us the starting position if all 3 of these values are there. Now, if thing isn't there, the next one I have to do is twofold. So, make sure I'm in the right place. Yeah. So then from here, it would be if, else if, building ID, we're going to start with this one here. And we're going to grab that all the way down to community again, down to there. And we're going to say, else if that, and we're going to make sure I get all that straight. Okay, so if, on this part, else if that building, and make sure I get that to the right place. No, that's not correct. Okay, I'm jumping ahead of myself on this one. This one is, if the building, then it needs to go all the way back down to that level, but what did I miss? That is there, that is, should have been, that's there. That's the one that's in the wrong place. Okay, now this particular one, actually we don't need that statement per se. We need the other statement that gives the original values, so we'll do that. Okay. Why is there missing a level? What did I miss here? This one, nope, see, it doesn't go all the way. Okay, I thought I did that. See, that's why I set everything into their value. Oh, it's just sitting down too far. That is this one, it just needs to be there. And now it goes to the else if. That one goes all the way back to there. See, gotta love the browser, gotta love the coding set. Okay, so from here, what we have is, okay, so I set these initial values and then I checked to see if the thing was there. Well, when I checked for the thing, I was checking in the things table. This is the one I initially need to pull. It looks exactly like that, except it's going to be for the building, and then the one that we need to copy afterwards is going to be based on the results of that. Okay, so what we're doing is we're changing this one to buildings, and that's building ID, we're going to bring in the building. Okay, so now we get the building, we find out the position of where the person's going to stand based on that building. It's the reminder, it's the position X, Y, and Z, rotation, and scaling for those. So now we bring in the building where they are in relation to the building, and then once again we have to bring in the position related to the community that that building is in and use that one. So as you can see, this code becomes very complex. Now you see why I wrote it as a store procedure the last time, had it all doing it on the database end of it, which good and bad reasons for that. But this is much better for being able to explain the code to other people, having it reusable, making it called as a function instead of running it in the database side. Let the web browser handle it, or web server handle it. It's PHP code. Okay, the other thing is right here, I said that if that's empty, what I need to do is I need to say and that building, because I do have conditions where the building is there and the, okay, so basically I have a, let's go, I'll do them in order. Community, the community is there, they're not empty, the building is not empty, and the thing is not empty, which means I've already validated them, I already know they exist. So then I need the position of the thing, where it is within the building, and then where it is within the community. Then, if that's not the case, then I need to know where, if I just have a community, all this stuff just to figure out where to put the avatar in the scene based on what is in the scene. Okay, and let's see, so we have, in this particular one, it's community and building ID are there. Then the next one, else if, this would be if the community is there. If the community is there and the thing is there, that means that there's a there's an item directly in. There's a, like a tree, could be an item, could be a tree or a picnic table or something, and that's placed directly into the community. The next one would be else if it's just a building and a thing in it. So let's go. So if there's a building with a thing in it, okay, and then the other possibility would be if it's just a building, if it's just a building, if it's just a thing, or if it's just a community. I'll go ahead and do that before it. I always make sure I get my ones that use community and a thing and community and a building before I put the thing, that one in here. Else if whenever I can, just for consistency, I try to do community, building, then thing in that order, so that if you see one piece of the code, you automatically know that it's the other ones would be handled underneath it and above it or what have you, in reference to it. Just one of those things where it's, the more consistent you are in the coding, the less likely you'll have mistakes, and the less likely it'll be a problem to fix if there is a mistake. Okay, so if we open up and it's just a building, that means all we need is the position based on this code. So I'm going to fill that in down here. That would go here. Okay, so that's fine for that. And if it's just a thing, it would be this one. Notice my database, I went in and picked up the things. Okay, so that's there, and I'm going to do one more for if it's just the community. Basically, it's whatever positions within the community. So we want this one for communities. Communities, we change that to community. We change this to community. And that's what helps with being consistent with the naming schemes. Okay, so then that would automatically bring back the positions if it's just a community, if it's just a building or just a thing. Little reminder, by the time we're done, you're going to be able to browse a building by itself by just saying the domain name, 3d.walktheweb.com or whatever domain it's on, / the word building or buildings. I accounted for both of them because that's hard to remember which one it's going to be. If you're calling a building or if you're calling buildings in the buildings group, it should mean the same thing in this case, so I did. And then / the name of the building. So if you did that type of format, you're going to get just the building loaded, and that's where we're going to pull up the position that the starting guide is going to be in. If you do the starting thing, then you say, or the domain name, then you did / things or thing / and then the name of the thing that you're looking for, then it'll bring up just that thing based on the one that has it on the domain name, which also means you cannot duplicate names within a domain name, per domain name. Only the published name of a particular thing, they all have to be unique, the published names per domain, and then also buildings have to be unique within a domain also, which I've also come to the realization that if I place two buildings in the same community that are the same building, I place it in there twice, that means I have to be able to name the published name different for one of the buildings so that it can decipher between the two. If I don't do that, the other way around it is you automatically get the first one of the two. But I'd rather it be more inclusive, so I'm gonna have it. I'm gonna work out some notation. I'm gonna play around with that and see what ends up being a good notation. It's kind of like bringing back an array of values, where if there's more than one building, you can have an array, and then I can use the same published name, but then if you don't include the array value, you get the first one. If you do, then you get any number of them afterwards. So, programmers understand that, and the general public would not. So, I don't want to go too much into that. Okay, so from this part here, what we're going to have is, I've got the thing. So for the other one that used the thing, I love how you can just copy and paste code all over the place here. So the thing within a community, I want the code for pulling up the thing. Then the other one is having a thing within a building, so I need the thing once again. Okay. And that should bring up those pieces. Now this one, since it used building, I need to get the adjustment made per thing with the building. Let's see, that would be this one here. No, it would be this one. Here we go. Okay, this one is, copy that. So this one is bringing back the building, thing within a building. So let's go down here where we have just a reference for a building and a thing, and this is going to be the adjustment for it, right there. And now we need, on this one, it's a thing within a community, so we want the code to adjust. That one's a building within thing. I may not have pulled a thing within a community. Okay, so let's take a copy of this one. And what I'm going to change is, so thing within a community, the adjustment we're going to need on that one is, okay, this one's going to be the thing ID as the web ID, and then the community ID. Okay, so the thing directly in the community will get the connecting grid that does that, get the values, then we read in the values, and the next piece that we're going to work on would be calculating those values, transforming them so that we are getting the right XYZ position based on the scaling and the rotation of each one of these objects placed in the scene. Okay, so with that said, that took you through a lot of different pieces. We've done quite a bit today. We're getting the scene settings. The next part after we do this at the position of the avatar as you load them in, then the next piece would be to actually load the settings of the scene. So I'm going to take a break, and If you're following me, it makes it real easy for you to know when I'm on again and be able to jump back in. I appreciate you being here, and I will be back on probably tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be early. Usually I've been broadcasting pretty late, like around noon or after. Tomorrow will be an earlier morning, so watch for me to log on probably 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's California time, Pacific time. And I want to thank all of you for watching today, and we'll continue on the project. Have a great day.